So we read today from the scriptures about a garden, right? It all started in a garden that God had created, and then on the sixth day, he created man. Now, if you remember from Genesis, starting with day 1, it says, and God created the heavens and the earth, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And then day 2, God created the stars and the sun and the moon, and there was evening, and there was morning, day 2. And when God created man, and he saw that it was good, there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. And on the 7th day, God rested. So man has been in the garden doing whatever. It was perfect. It was wonderful. He could eat from anything he wanted. He had animals for companions, and God goes, it's not good that he's all by himself. So it said that he put Adam into a deep sleep, and he removed a rib, and he fashioned woman from man. And he placed both of them in the garden, and they had only one rule. Well, one broken into 2. Do not eat of the 2 trees, the one of good and evil, and the one of the tree of life. They could eat of anything in this garden, just not those 2. How many parents do I have here in the crowd? Okay, what happens when you tell your kids, don't? It becomes so much more tempting, doesn't it, when God says, don't. Well, they were doing pretty good, though. They really were. They had not touched it. It didn't say that Eve kept sauntering by it and looking at it or up and almost wanting to touch it. No, it doesn't say that. It says all of a sudden a serpent shows up in the garden, which I'm sure the serpent had been there, but he starts talking to Eve. Obviously, that wasn't an odd thing back then. But the serpent starts talking to her, and he says, you know you want some. You know you want some. Go ahead. And she says, oh, no. God says that not only if we eat it, if we just even touch it, we're going to die. Have you ever said that to your kids? If you even just go so much as close to that, so help me God. Yeah. What does the serpent say? You're not gonna die, silly. God knows that once you eat of it, you're gonna be just like him. Well, now it became a little more tempting. Now all of a sudden, it's not just the look, it's not just the smell, but now it's the thought, I can be like God. How many here have ever raised teenagers? You ever had teenagers wanting to be just like you or thinking that they can be just like you and make their own decisions and do their own thing? I'm old enough, right? Even though you know the outcome. Okay, well, that's where we're at. So it says that Eve succumbed to the serpent. She ate of the apple. It wasn't an apple, but we use an apple. And it says that she looked at it, and it was very tantalizing, and it was very good to look at. And then she realizes, I touched it. I ain't dead. So then she eats. Ooh, and it tasted so good, too. So then she goes, I'm still here. Maybe the serpent is more right than God. So she goes over to Adam, and she gives him the fruit. And it says he eats too. Now the interesting thing here is that right after they ate, well, they didn't die. Oh, but what did they notice? That they were naked. Now, I would even argue so much as it wasn't the physical nakedness just that they noticed. They were exposed. They felt for the first time guilty. They were emotionally naked. This isn't God comes walking in the garden. Have you ever wondered where we get that? And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. Yeah, well, God was walking in the garden. And it says, where was Adam and Eve? They were hiding behind the tree. And he says, where are you? And what does Adam say? He confesses. He confesses like any good kid. He says, well, I was hiding because I was afraid because I'm naked. And God said, who told you you were naked? Then he says, probably without even having to see the apple juice running from his face, he said, did you eat of the tree that I told you not to eat of? And what does Adam say? She made me do it. And he looks at Eve and he says, what have you done? And she goes, the serpent made me do it. We can't relate to any of this, can we? This is like foreign material, I know. Only Hebrew stuff. Yeah. So see, this is a passage I love in the Bible. It says, because then God put an enemy between the snake and the woman. See, there's a reason why we hate snakes. It is biblical and it is prophesied. But then they're kicked out of the garden. See, man was made on the sixth day. The garden was made for man on the sixth day, but man fell on the sixth day. There is one in your book that is called The Sixth Day, and it's on page 47. Now, if you will notice, when Jesus starts the last day, it would be the day of Passover. We're getting ready to do communion. It was there that Jesus sat at the table after sunset with his friends, the disciples. And they partook of that last meal together. And from there, then they went to the Mount of Olives, and they sang, and they did hymns, and he taught a little more. And then it said he went to the Garden of Gethsemane. And it was there in the garden that the Roman soldiers came and arrested him because Judas had betrayed him. And they take him all the way across town to Caiaphas' house, and there's a mock trial, so to speak, and they bring him to Pilate. And Pilate sees him and questions him, and he sends him all the way across town to Herod. And Herod questions him, makes fun of him, puts royal robes on him, and says, I see nothing, and sends him all the way back to Pilate. And then Pilate tries again to free him, doesn't happen, so he brings out Barabbas for a choice. But Jesus is the one chosen. So he has him flogged, and he has him beaten, and he has him stripped, and they put the crown of thorns on his head. And then he carries his cross, and he goes all the way to the hill of Golgotha until the first trumpet sounds and the first lamb of the day is sacrificed. All that happened until 9 o'clock in the morning. And from 9 o'clock in the morning, he's on the cross all the way until 3 o'clock, being the guilt offering for all, until the last lamb is sacrificed. The trumpets are blown. He said, it is finished. Earthquake happens. The sky darkens. They take him off of the cross. They put him in the tomb. They seal it up. Sun down. From Thursday on sundown to Friday on sundown, 24 hours. And what day of the week was it? The sixth day. So it all began at sunset until the following sunset. He accomplished it all on the sixth day, the day of man. He died for the sins of man, for the guilt of man, for the fall of man, and he did it all on the day of man to accomplish the redemption of man. As it was on the sixth day as well that man was first given life, so now in Messiah the children of man can begin to be given life and find life again, beginning on the sixth day. So here we have all that on the day of man. See, nothing escapes God. But it doesn't end there, because there's two trees. We've talked about the tree of good and evil, but we also talked about the tree of eternal life. And then we have another tree that was used. This was the tree of the fall of man, but the cross is made out of what? Wood. Wood from a tree. And it is the cross that brings redemption to man. So the tree that was alive brings death. The tree that was dead brings life. The tree that caused the fall of man, the tree that causes the redemption of man. It all happened with the two trees. And God has placed the first tree in the center of the garden. He also placed the second tree not only in the center of history, but in the center of the two thieves. All of this to redeem man on that sixth day. So I told the kids that they were going to have to wait for the magic trick. Well, here it is. So now, kids, you got to pay attention. Mallory, over here. So we talked about the fruit. Oh, you don't have to call all the way up. You could just watch. So we talked about the fruit. And it was because of that fruit that we have the fall of man. Well, let's see if I can do this. I got them all kind of mixed up. And it was when they ate of that fruit is what started sin. Right? They were in eternal bondage. And it was because of that sin that they had to constantly keep coming before God. Just like we did at Ash Wednesday, we have to come before God to ask for forgiveness. Well, before the cross, the Jewish people would have to come together on the holiest of all holy days, which was Yom Kippur. And there was a scarlet cord, pretend that's a scarlet cord, that hung up in the temple. And when that goat had been laid his hands on and the sacrifice had been made, it said something happened that was strange. Because all the sins for Israel was forgiven for that moment, and that scarlet cord became white as snow. It was a miracle. No explanation. But see, it didn't last. It only lasted for that day, because then afterwards, guess what happened to that cord? It became scarlet again. To remind them that they could not be forgiven continually. They were sinful. It was only through the sacrifice. Did you catch the part about what God did for them? Well, first it said, when they found they were naked, they took leaves and they sewed them together. I'd like to see that. How do you sew leaves together? But they sewed them together and they made loincloths. But then it said that God, after he exposes them, said he did something interesting. He fashioned clothes out of skins. But how do you get skins? An animal has to die. See, the very first sacrifice took place in the garden to atone for their sins. Have you ever done something that's bad enough when you do something wrong and you have to deal with the consequences? But what if you do something that the consequences affect somebody else? Oh, that makes it 10 times worse, doesn't it? And I truly believe that Adam and Eve had to stand there and watch that first animal die so they could have clothes. And it's because of that sacrifice that continually goes throughout all of history. All of history right up until that sixth day. The sixth day that Jesus hung on the cross for our sin. But it doesn't end there. Because of our sin, he died and he rose up, releasing us from the sin by the blood that was shed. Amen.